everybody and welcome. I put this presentation together in the fall for the Atlantic Canadian Organic Regional Network's annual conference, and it went over very well. So I proposed to BCAFM that it would be worth bringing, and basically what you're going to see is a series of juxtapositions, pictures of things that are working in terms of merchandising and displays, and things that aren't working so well. Many of the photos have been taken by me. They're from around North America because I travel and go to markets all over and take pictures. Some of them are from our former executive director when she took a trip out to BC, so I'm really crossing my fingers that nobody here is in the slides with the X on me. And if that happens, I so apologize for that. Before we get into the pictures, I just want to say a couple things about direct marketing. Because what makes sales at farmers markets and direct marketing different from commodities marketing is that both you, or the person behind the product, and the way that you're bringing it to the consumer in terms of your merchandising or your presentation, they're all part of the sales. Nova Scotia, by the way, has the highest number of farmers markets per capita in Canada. So while we may be small, we're about the size of 1.5 Vancouver Islands. We are mighty in terms of our farmers market sector. And we do have a growing wine industry. One of the things we've come to learn is, I hate to offend anybody in the room, but there's a lot of wine on the market, and what differentiates people is less, well, there's a certain segment of the population who it's the wine itself. But for many other people, it's kind of the experience, do I get along with the person who's selling it? Do I like the gimmick that they have on the wine tour? And so this is a great example of the product matters, but the presentation and the producer have a lot to do with the final sale in direct marketing. So let's look first just at the big picture. What you see when you walk up to a table. And you might look at this and you say, oh, it's pretty good actually. Why does she have an X on that one? And it is okay, but then look at this one. See the difference? See the draping all the way to the floor? This is a big concrete space. There's a great benefit in having your drapes go all the way to the floor. And notice they're stitched. They're not just blowing in the wind and hitting people. This stitched, fitted drapes for your farmer's market table is one of the great innovations that you can make to your marketing. Potted plants is one of the few products that can be displayed well on the ground at a farmer's market, but not in this case, because if you notice, there's no easy access for the customers through this. There's kind of a lot happening, and the plants are all squished together. So I'd say that gets an X. Here's a market I was at in New York City in January, a couple of years ago, and they're using their side displays to keep out wind and cold, because it's New York City after all. But I loved how they also used it as an opportunity to do some marketing. And here's another one that I think is great, actually. It gets the heart of approval, I guess. You notice they're using the vehicle and the tent as kind of a backdrop. All of that stuff has to fit in that one little van, so they're using their crates and then plywood sheets to create these tables. There's lots of room around each of them. They kind of have a shape to the display. I like how the dill and the cucumbers are being sold together. What their signs are about is the produce, the tomatoes and the cucumbers, not about the name of their farm necessarily. Here's some examples of working with 3 dimensions. Here's a jeweler at a farmer's market and everything's basically flat on the table. That person is right beside them. You can see it's the same sign. But this woodworker next door, this is the Halifax Seaport Farmers Market, is making nice use of vertical displays. Let's see what else. We have some preserves, again, using stacking shelves. I know you're thinking this is simple, but Many of you are guilty of not putting stuff up. Here's a permanent display for bakery at the Dieppe Farmers Market in New Brunswick. They have nice shelves in the back and a range of heights for their product. This one gets a small heart, not quite the biggest heart. It's the right idea for certain people and certain products that you can hang stuff from your tent. You need to be really careful with all of those things hanging in the front though, because if you're hitting your tall customers in the breeze, this is a negative as opposed to a positive. I love how the art cards are displayed in these wooden things to keep them propped up. Okay, less can be more. This is somebody selling cookies and sweaters for your dog. It takes a while to figure that out. The little stuffed animals don't help. That's not what they're selling. It takes a while to study this picture to really see what it is that they're selling. Versus this one, which at first glance it's equally as busy, but the way there's some vertical lines like this, everything has got a theme going on. It's pretty easy to orient yourself visually around this booth. Here's the less is more part. There's way too much shelving display space going on here and not nearly enough product. This would look better if she figured out a way to put all of this product just on the table. The common mistake here is I've got 10 feet of space, so I'm going to use it, even though I only have 2 totes worth of product. It's the only one from me and my family. This is my son. A few years ago at the children's booth at one of the markets near us. He doesn't have a lot, so he used a small table. He squished it in there. He has his plants and his rhubarb, some jams that he picks. And he picks the fruit, Mom makes the jam, but it's his. So nice big signs. This is a tiny little booth. But he does very well because everything's condensed and he's got some height going on in terms of his merchandising. I really like the aprons. I think we don't do enough of that sort of branding ourselves at markets, but I don't like this display. There's not enough. They'd be better off to have a half this size table and put everything together. And it's the same principle with running your farmers markets, if any of you are here. If you have a room this size and 4 vendors, put them all right here. Don't put one in each corner. Space at a farmer's market creates that sense of I am an island. And there's too much space, so it feels like they don't have much product. This sign is also way too small. Here, there's a few pictures here from the Duncan Farmers Market from my trip out here last year to the BCFM conference. Grass-fed beef. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't like that the fellow is sitting down. That's a no-no from a merchandising perspective. But I like that the sign is simple and he's selling one product. Here's another example of a booth that on first glance is well organized, you know, the soap and the rustic feel, but if you look closely, there's a lot of wasted space, and again, I feel like this whole wooden shelf on the side, because there's hardly anything on it. If anything, it just detracts from what she's selling, and this would be better all on one table. Less wood and more product. Unless you're a woodworker. This looks like a woodworker's booth. This is perfect! Got one cooler, make it small. So great. He's not trying to remind us what his business name is either. It's about the product. Here's another little table. Imagine if this was spread out on a regular 3 by 6. It wouldn't look as good. Lighting, well, let's see. This is an example of somebody who has a yellow tent, and it really isn't helping their product at all. You have to be careful when you're buying certain kinds of tents because they don't showcase well. This is an indoor market. It could just be the picture, but you can barely even see what's in that little container. Indoor markets just about always need supplemental light. The people who are really good at this are the crafters who do bigger craft shows in the falls. If you ever are moving into an indoor farmers market, take advantage of some of those artisan crafters who are at the top of their game. They do lighting beautifully. And here's an example of somebody who's using their tent to shade, which is appropriate, but you notice that the dark blue tablecloths just pull the lighting down to the concrete. This display would look so much better with a tan or a linen or a burlap kind of tablecloth. The dark blue isn't doing them any favors in terms of their lighting because they're trying to work with shade. Okay, this is about bins and baskets. Black plastic baskets don't show off produce very well. These exact same bins come in white and they come in a light gray. You'll see in some of the subsequent pictures, produce pops out of those. The beautiful greens of our produce don't look good in black if you compare it with, so that one's just wood. You can see how much brighter the coloring is of green on a lighter colored display basket. This one's white, but I don't think it works for other reasons. But mostly it's that there's too much stuff. It's similar to that one where you're seeing a lot of wood instead of product. Here you're just seeing a lot of white. This booth would be better as they're selling out to be moving everything over to one side and putting some nice big signs or something in the gaps. I also think the bottom tier is too low. We look at it from an empty booth perspective. Oh my God, everything looks so good. We've got our signs hanging from the table and stuff. And as soon as there's one person in our booth, they're blocking that vantage point for everybody else that's coming along. So always be thinking signage and product up above waist height. These are perfect. These are beautiful baguettes in tall baskets. That works very well. This one got a small heart. I really like these kinds of baskets and I think they work well until you're about an hour from the end of market. And then everything's picked over and people have to go into, it's harder to see into these baskets. So if you're using things that have some depth to it, what the seasoned farmers will do is dump them out, stick something in to take up some space so that the last of the product is still sitting up higher in the baskets. This one also came from the Duncan Farmers Market. It has a slightly smaller heart. I love these. I think they're wonderful, and you've noticed they've got painted blackboard signs on the front so that they're interchangeable. So the only reason it's a smaller heart is they didn't, the writing isn't very clear. You have this beautiful opportunity to do some great merchandising. You needed to take a little more time to make those signs more legible. And even halfway through the market, to go through and re-chalk some of your signs, because what happens is just through the course of the day, your chalk wears down. One of the sort of customer service tips from a customer perspective is to make sure the person who comes 5 minutes before the end of the day is getting the exact same experience as you're giving to those first people early in the morning. And that's hard. We're tired. We're exhausted. We've dealt with all the humanness, the messy humanness that happens in the run of the day. But that's the gauge that you can use. How is my customer service? Did that person who came at 10 to 1 get all of me or only part of me? And so this goes back to the whole, take the time to redo your signs or whatever you need to do to freshen up your booth so that that last hour, even if it says sold out, I'll have more tomatoes next week, because people have just put sold out, but they don't say sold out of what. It doesn't plant in anybody's mind what they can come find from you next time. There's so many moments of wasted marketing opportunities at farmers markets, so your sold out signs are important. This one is in a permanent building, and except for all the clutter on the bottom, which I think they might have done just for the photo op, because this isn't mine, it came off the internet. Some of the indoor farmers market booths that we're starting to see, here's their problem. They're almost too boutique. Farmers market is different from classic merchandise in various ways. And there are market vendors who don't do as well when they bring in their high-end craft show booth and put it together at a farmer's market. Now it can work in certain markets, but certainly not all of them. So what I love is this is an indoor permanent venue, but they still have a really down-home, rustic farmer's market feeling going on. And I think that's really appropriate for selling produce in this setting. This one is, the heart here is about the bags that are in the baskets. When you're bagging items in sales baskets and you have multiple little items, you put your bag in first, you just slip the bag up over the product and their stuff is bagged. There's no dumping their produce. Oops, sorry, I dropped your tomato. Just have it, and then you keep the baskets in the way the customer goes with the bag. You can see in the back they have some chili and jalapeno peppers that are done the same way. So that's just a great way to merchandise things that are small that you're selling in baskets that you want them to take away in a bag instead of a basket, just to do it ahead of time. And then here's the question, do I even need a bin or basket? And so there's some beautiful examples at farmers markets of people doing just really good displays, piles of things. Just on a plain tablecloth, slightly smaller heart here because I think a tablecloth to cover the concrete. See, what's behind them is this big old truck, so what we can't see, but there's some big old dirty wheels and stuff. It's just not helpful, but I love the bushel baskets and the cornucopia of stuff spilling out of them. I think that looks really nice from a merchandising perspective. Who is she to tell me that my tablecloths matter that much? But just hear me out here and watch these. And then I look at those skinny little legs. All of these young boys at markets with their skinny little chicken legs, that is very endearing to me. But we also have to see the dirt and the concrete and stuff in order to see them. So compare that to, well, that's a real high-end look. That's, and I would almost say that's a problem to have put their signage so low, except that they're also doing a good job of putting it high. The most important thing is those signs across the top. There's another booth that doesn't have any tablecloths. Versus, okay, so here's an artisan vendor. Lots of times black doesn't work at markets. Oh my gosh, we have black laying around. But for something like wood, something like leather, sometimes the black can work pretty well. Generally dark doesn't, but that's an example of it working well. Here's some tablecloths, and they all match. But just look at the difference with this one. It's just that little bit straighter. You have those little burlap pieces in the center. They're not going down all the way to the bottom, that will be better, but you can just see the taking the 5 seconds to adjust your tablecloth. It does make a difference. Well, my husband and I love to watch renovation shows. You know how they renovate houses, and one of the theories there is you want to build a house for a tenant or for somebody else that's something that's as beautiful as you would want to live in. There's lots of people who just flip houses or have rentals to make a quick buck, but there's the people who really create something livable for somebody else. And it's kind of the same principle here is these two people might have the exact same price on all of their product, but there's just something that says here, I've taken the time to straighten my tablecloth for you. It's like a service. It's like a way of giving something that you would want to be on the receiving end of. It's just a mess. It can work. Look, they're selling stuff. It's fine, but it says something almost to the customer about who the customer might be. This one has a particular vibe, and it wouldn't be everybody's vibe, but for the people who this is their vibe, look at how well done it's put together. So you have to realize that whatever your aesthetic is, it won't necessarily appeal to everybody. And this is where I might stop for a second and say something about competition. Somebody would give us 2 sets of ingredients and say, go home tonight and bring us some loaves of bread tomorrow. And guess what? With the exact same ingredients and the same recipe, we're still going to come up with two different products. Because our prior knowledge comes into play, the temperature of our ovens comes into play, just who we are as people and how we would form those loaves of bread would be different. But I'll take it a step further, and if you gave us the exact same trays of bread and sent us to the same farmer's market and said, go sell these, guess what? Certain people would buy from her and certain people would buy from me. Because the way we set it up matters, and who we are as people matter. Nobody can sell to everybody. There's no product in direct marketing that is the same as somebody else's product, because the person and your presentation are part of the sale. It's different from commodities. That's just product based on price. Direct selling, who we are and our presentation matters. So in this case, this is a particular kind of aesthetic. She just leaned into it here. It doesn't mean everybody who wants handmade soap will buy from her. But it does mean there's room for a whole lot of other handmade soap vendors at her farmer's market, because it's not just about the soap. This is a certain way of purchasing. Okay, can they read your signs? I say no to this one. There's a lot of information in a very little sign. And arugula, $3 for 100 grams. I've been around farmers markets for over 20 years, and I still don't know how much 100 grams of arugula really would be. So I don't know. What is the $3 arugula at 100 grams? It's much better to do pricing by units that people know, or you put out sample bags so that people know. Here's a 100-gram bag of arugula. That's the $3 bag. People don't care about the weight, they care about the unit and the price. This one gets a small, smaller heart. It's a nice sign, less going on, but it needs a midday refresh really badly. They've crossed too many things out without using water, and it's starting to be messy. This one's a downright, because we can read this less and less. There's fewer things on the sign, but they really need to take the time to wash this with water. This one works really well, I think. They've used the flour bags or the bags that the flour would come in that the bakery is using, and they've put almost a printed press look signs on there. So that works well, and it's interchangeable. Flour to the people. Let's talk a bit about labeling. So these are signs that are hanging down off the tablecloth, and they only work if there's supplemental information to somebody who's right there purchasing the product. But if that's the only signage about what the product is or what the price is, then that doesn't work. This one gets a thumbs up because more and more people who shop at farmers market have a lot of food knowledge. And people want to start buying varieties. They want to start buying named varieties of things. It's a way to stand out in the marketplace. So this doesn't say carrots, sweet and tasty. It says carrots, and then Nancy's Corliss is a variety of carrot. And then each of the carrots, so they name them and they say what makes them special. Long keeper, sweet, tender, or great for juicing. So this is an example of I'm not just selling carrots, I'm selling a particular kind of carrot to you. Ooh, and I'm getting $4 a bunch for it. Here's a nice job of bagging up some cookies. Here's a Greek salad pack. Very few people will buy from you the cucumber, the tomato, the peppers, and the garlic going home to make Greek salad. But if you put this in front of them, oh my gosh, lunch tomorrow. So this is just a clever way of packaging and planting a seed or an idea in people's minds. Here's an example of a few lost opportunities, I think. First of all, they have great signage in terms of the name of the mushroom and what the price is per pound. But again, we're back to the per pound per pound problem. So those paper bags that are in the front, my recommendation would be they weigh out a $6.99 bag or 2 or 3 of the oysters and put them in front. And then they do the same with the brown creminis, and they do the same with the white. So that there's a bunch of pre-bagged bags. This does a few things. It tells people how much they're going to get for the price that they're going to pay. And especially for higher end items like oyster mushrooms, that can be the difference between selling and not selling the product. But secondly, there's a lot of people who are like rushing through the market. Ooh, great, it's already bagged. I'm going to pay you for it, and away I go. The waiting in line while somebody puts on their glove and puts the mushrooms in the bag, there's people who don't want that. So by offering some pre-bagged bags of mushrooms, you kind of do 2 things. You help serve the people who want to move through the process more quickly, and people know what the amounts are. Secondly, the other comment I guess I would make is that, oh my gosh, there's so many great things that differentiate these mushrooms from one another, but nothing on their sign says that. This is another one of those examples of delicious in soup, or full of antioxidants, or one of the most nutritious mushrooms on the market. That, you know, there's room on those signs to just take it up a notch and tell people why it matters that they should buy any particular mushroom that's on sale here. And then she's sitting down. And finally, for mushrooms, this is a great product for giving out recipes. It can really matter for a product like this, especially, say, oyster mushrooms. They have portobellos. People all think they know what to do with a portobello mushroom, but you really put it in the hands of consumers, and most of them are like, I either need a barbecue grill or I need to be vegetarian and put it in my burger. 2 great uses for portobellos, but there's so much more you can do with them. So it's your job to tell them. She's getting $5 a pound for her carrots because she put them in a bag and said, gourmet. Some of them to me almost look like they could pass as seconds if they were in a bin where people were picking their own, because some of them have a bit of a curve to them. But these are pre-packaged and labeled in a certain way, and they command a premium price. This is from a market in Ontario. Here's from producer friends of mine in a New Brunswick farmers market. They are selling transplants. And lots of you who are doing fresh produce would do well to get into the transplant business. It's growing by leaps and bounds, but not only do they have the little stick with Cherokee, purple, or Matt's wild cherry tomato, but there's actually a picture of what the end product is. It's just so simple that people aren't taking the time, and those are laminated. Ooh, I'm going to buy more because look, I want cherry and purple and yellow. And I really like, this is from the Dufferin Grove Organic Farmers Market in Toronto. She's got these baskets. She has her greens bags all labeled. There's information about how to cook it, there's information about her farm. She's got it propped up and tilted toward the customer. It's just right in people's face. It's so beautiful and enticing, this booth, and the way she's labeled her bags of greens. These are pots of herbs, good labels, herbs, transplants. They look so good against wood. All of these down here are repeats of ones that are higher up. You'd be better off to put a few of everything on the first 2 tiers and then just have your repeats below than to have all the basil, all the dill, and then the oregano is until the bottom. And this isn't a label, but this is a way to differentiate your product. It serves the same purpose that labeling can serve. And then I threw in a picture of some seeds. I think this is a pretty good one for a farmer's market. It's very basic. It's not even made out of wood, but everything's labeled well. There's pictures, the price sign is there. And that doesn't say the name of her farm. His farm, it says the name, what the product is. This one gets a small heart. They're doing some things right. There's the wine producers who put one of everything on the table, and then there's the wine producers who put several bottles of each thing on the table. The wine industry, I know, has an entire merchandising arm, so I don't want to argue with the wisdom behind either approach. but I will say studying farmers markets and watching, people are more apt to feel free to pick things up when they don't feel like they're exclusive, one of a kind. And it's almost why I think artisan vendors do better at farmers markets when they're production producers. We're working on a whole series. We have a grant from the tourism department in Nova Scotia to do artisan training for merchandising and marketing stuff in the farmers market sector. And I'm running the program, and here's what I found is that some artisans do terrible in the farmers market sector, and some do really well. The one-off, one-of-a-kind producers have a harder go of it. The production artists do better. And there's lots of reasons for that. I don't want to get into it. But something in merchandising is you want people to touch the product themselves. And people are much more apt to pick up things when there isn't only one of them. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to sell the last one or two of something? As soon as it's specialized in that way, forget it. It's so hard to sell it. And so these groupings of wine bottles seem to work. Signage. So here's a great sign that nobody can see because the customer is standing in front of it, which doesn't matter for that particular customer because they're engaged in a conversation with the producer, but for everybody else who's walking by and isn't sure what's happening, that's a real missed opportunity to have your sign down at knee level. And also, just from a merchandising perspective, the fact that we have beet greens and rhubarb way far in the corner, and all of that empty space right up in that prime selling area. In merchandising, there's these zones of real estate that stores design their merchandising displays around. When you walk in the front door of a store, the area right in front and the area right to the right are the two most prime areas. This is where stores put the stuff that's the most expensive, not the stuff that's on discount, although there are discount stores that do it differently. Everything that you can feel and touch are in those two prime areas. So he hasn't, his prime space is empty. I wanted to move those up so badly. I just love this sign. And what I love the most about it is it says Growers, Doug and Sarah. It just has a real personalized, approachable feeling to it. And then look at those smiling faces. This is sad because I love the sign. And I don't like the AstroTurf or anything else. This gets a positive and a negative because I love their signage in the background. Handcrafted organic bread, but then what happened is they're blocking that whole sign with their product. So they need to rethink just how they're using their prime marketing space. Because here's another thing is if you're at farmers markets just for the day of sales, you're missing a huge opportunity. Your sales should never be the #1 measure of your success at farmers markets. How many people's emails did you take home so that you could communicate with them outside of market day? How many pictures did you take of a customer engaging with your product so that you can post them on social media? We're in the business of selling for 4 or 5 hours a week. We need to use that time not just to sell, but to get our names and our contact information into the hands of our consumers and to get their information so we can engage with them, build our relationships with them through the week. So, back to this. One of the key pieces of information you need to make sure that if I walked by today, it's maybe a lost sale. But if I walk by and don't know the name of your business or what you do because your stuff is in the way of your sign, that's worse. So Chipotle, the prime part of the tent, what is Chipotle? Now, it does say Mexican grill very low on the table near the grass, but then you look at it and you're like, there's no food, I'm seeing pots of tomatoes and herbs on the ground. I still don't really know what this vendor is selling.
Where's the grill?
Right. So this is a real disconnect between the marketing and what they're selling, to the point that we can't even figure out what really they would be offering.
The background is cool.
Yeah, there's lots about the professionalism that is working.
Smell station.
The smell station! It doesn't say sweet peas, it says smell station. It's just so great. Smell is one of those primordial senses. The smell of sweet peas will take people just back, and it's sort of an invitation to have a multi-dimensional experience. I also love that their vegetables are called soul food. Soul food, and then kale, arugula, and all these things that are so good for us. It's just reminding us that our health is good for our soul as well. So I think there's a lot going well for this vendor. So I'm going to bust all of these lovely looking people who are sitting down at market day. You spent all week growing your product, getting it there, the long hours, the schlepping. And then you just look like you're not really into it. Or you look like how we all feel at the end of the day on Saturday. But the time to crash is when you get home. So these people, I think that they look so friendly, but their display is lacking and they shouldn't be sitting. But she is ready to go. She's alert, she's approachable, there's nothing artificial. Somebody earlier was talking about authenticity. I don't care for the product she's selling really, but she's doing a great job just being really open and approachable. She knows she's being busted, so her picture, she's laughing. But look, she's even reading.
Or on their cell phones.
So, right, the cell phones, even the knitters and the crocheters. I know you're trying to multitask. I know sometimes there's dead times at a farmer's market. But if you can't stand there for the 4 or 5 hours of a whole week, just ready to be there for people, then I wonder why direct selling appeals to you, because there isn't a good fit with what direct selling is really about. Look at her! Now we would all buy a Christmas card from her because she's so adorable, but she's just standing in the perfect way. Any one of us who could look so well poised would do well as well. There's a lot not working in this display, but part of it is that you can tell this vendor has this low, comfortable pink chair sitting there. She's walked out of the booth to take a picture, and she's going to walk right back into that spot and stay there. This table should definitely be turned forward and be facing the public. There's people who need the extra space in a 10 by 10 and can get people into the booth. But that to me is a lost opportunity when she has so little product, not to be having it facing out towards the public. The chocolate doctors need to stand up. I love whatever is happening in those jars, but there's a lot about this display that I think over the next few weeks they'll get better at this. Here I just want to make the point that product isn't a product isn't a product. You'll get different price points based on the merchandising and displays. So here we have somebody who has made an awful lot of handmade chocolates. There's a whole lot of work in that. But she'll charge a different price for them than she'll get. That's a 50-cent $1 chocolate maybe. Those are $1 to $2. Here's the same with some jams and preserves. Those utility shelves belong in your garage, not at the farmer's market, versus those preserves. Those two people work just as hard to make those products. This doesn't say that she's using anything different in her product, but you just feel it very differently. I've alluded to this a few times. If you're going to leave people with one piece of information, unless you are so lucky as to have a business name that is related to your product. So for example, there's a great market in Halifax called Local Source. local source market. You kind of know in the business name what they're about, sourcing local product. But in many cases here, watch the difference. This sign, Duncan Farmers Market, and I'm sorry the sign isn't very good. Flour, water, and 18 hours. Slow bread. Brilliant. Doesn't matter what the name of their business is. The people who are going to love this product need to know that it's about this simplicity and this process. The Happy Camels, if it was just the Happy Camels, everybody would walk by, but it's about their award-winning hummus and dips and pita. This is a cute little seed display, and they're starting to make it work in terms of the labels. They've got some information. The face of the earth is the name of the farm. That one tiny little moment they have should say something like whatever they are. Organic seeds or heirloom seeds or locally grown seeds, whatever it is, you have this one little piece of space to tell the consumer something about your product. Face of the earth isn't it. I loved this one. Their farm name is Kilrenny Farm, but it's about the fresh artisan pasta sauces. That's what matters. That's what people who are walking up to their side of the farmer's market from 300 feet back are going to be drawn to. If it just said Kilrenny Farm, somebody might just think it's farm product, produce. Marie and Guy's French Bakery. It's kind of running, it's kind of getting a little worn, but it's simple and it tells people what they need to know about their product. This is Farmer Sue. This one's perfect. It's the name of her, it's the name of her business, and it's what she does, all wrapped into one. It's not glamorous, but Farmer Sue's done a good job. I think that you could have some longer drapes, perhaps, but because she's on the grass, it's very different than when you're on concrete. You can get away with a lot more when you're on a grass space. Great samples. So what I'll just preface this with saying is that sampling laws vary the country over, and they vary greatly in the US as well. So don't get hung up on, ooh, we couldn't do that at all in BC. That may be the case. But I'm kind of trying to make a couple points here. One is that messy, empty pickled beet tray looks terrible. And secondly, there's food spilling out. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see it. There's food spilling out. And those are, I think, styrofoam bowls. Anyway, there's just a lot to clean up here in order for those samples to be really tight. You may not be able to sample charcuterie meat out in public, but this is wonderful if you can. I love the handwritten labels. I love the way the strings are still attached to the labels. And it's a self-serve business. The knife and the cutting board fit that business model very well. Here's melons. I think melons are something that more of us could be selling. We're doing production growing, but people need to know what melons taste like. And on this first little sign, the one furthest to your left, it says melon uses. So it's also telling people what they can do with those melons. So not just here's how to taste, but here's how to use it. Okay, so this is emotional blackmail, but it works. If you have a little cutie in your family, why not? Here's the apple cider samples. I wonder a little bit about having them right at kid level. It feels like that's possibly inviting a problem, but it's also working well. The big open bowls of salsa, I know, could be a challenge. It might be a requirement to put some covers on that, but what I want to point out are these little sample cups with the salsa and then the chips right in it. And there's somebody out front handing those out to people. If you're gonna sample, this is the way to sample. This is generous. They're making a big deal about it. Visually, it's super compelling. And then I just wanted to say something about the handing of samples versus having samples that people can self-serve. When I hand something to somebody, this is a gift, it's an offer. It has a different feeling, a different intention behind it. It's a little more intimate. If you're going to the trouble of sampling, it's worth it to take that moment of time to connect with somebody and give them something.
Yeah, I was just wondering about like flow for vegetables. Currently we kind of have like tables in a row, and just thinking about setting up like trying to make more deliberate flow. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I wonder if he's looking for some other suggestions from the group of produce vendors in the room who are doing interesting things with their flow rather than straight tables.
In the past, we grew a lot of vegetables and we concentrated on vegetable sales, and we started with a small table in the front of the booth, but we had to expand to display more things. And we found an L shape worked really well, where the customers would come in and walk the L, and then the cash register and the paying area was at the end, and then people could line up and go through the flow, and we just directed the customers like that. We found it worked really well.
Yeah, so just a comment, at least in Vancouver, we would have a hard time displaying vegetables not under a canopy. The health authorities are a little concerned about that. But something that people do when they have more than a 10 by 10 space, so like a 20 by 10 kind of frontage, is a U shape with even like a little mini table in the front as well. So that kind of like you were saying, like people are forming a line all the way around, and it's like you start on one side and you might be waiting in line, and as you're waiting in line, you're kind of picking stuff up around the U-shaped stall, which I've seen work pretty well.
Versus the stalls where you just have bottlenecks of people being served right in the front, and the line is cascading out, but they're not having an opportunity to shop while they wait. This is about how can you figure out a way for the waiting and the shopping to be one and the same. And don't forget, from a customer service perspective, you can be so busy, I'm handling cash, I'm bagging things up for you, but every minute or two to look to the line and say, we'll be with you in a moment. That moment of eye contact, people will wait for 10 or 15 minutes. They just want to know that you know that they're waiting. It also prevents some of that, okay, now I've given you the money. Can we talk about the weather and the football game and our kids are in cheerleading? This is a business and I need to move on to the next customer. So that moment of time that I take, I just say, just a second. And I look to the line and I say, we'll be with you as soon as I can. It's a communication that benefits everybody. Thank you all for coming.